This is the moment that changed everything. At her own wedding reception, Sarah Mitchell was glowing with happiness, her cheeks flushed from dancing, when she approached her new husband to share in what should have been the most beautiful night of her life. Instead, she heard words that would haunt her for months to come. David Mitchell, emboldened by champagne and surrounded by his colleagues from Hartwell Industries, looked at his approaching wife and said with a cruel laugh, "Well, I guess I'm stuck with the fat pig now that we're married. At least she's good with money." Sarah froze mid-step, the smile dying on her face as the words hit her like a physical blow. The ambient noise of the reception seemed to fade into a distant hum as she stood there, paralyzed by humiliation. She had spent 2 years planning this wedding, working overtime for months to afford the venue, the flowers, the dress that made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. She had used every penny of her savings and taken on debt to create the celebration David demanded, believing it was an investment in their future happiness. What Sarah didn't know was that standing just a few feet away, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar, was Marcus Chun. The 42-year-old tech entrepreneur had attended the reception as a courtesy after completing his acquisition of Hartwell Industries through his investment firm earlier that week. He had wanted to meet employees and assess the workplace culture of his new company, but he had never expected to witness such cruelty. Marcus understood the pain of being judged by appearance better than most. As an overweight child who had endured years of bullying, he had channeled that pain into academic excellence and eventually business success. Now worth over $200 million, he had never forgotten what it felt like to be made to feel worthless because of how he looked. The casual cruelty in David's voice transported him instantly back to his own childhood humiliations. Sarah excused herself quietly and disappeared toward the bathroom, her elegant posture crumbling as she walked away. David, completely oblivious to Marcus's presence, continued entertaining his colleagues with crude jokes about marriage being a trap and making increasingly vulgar comments about Sarah's appearance and their future together. His laughter grew louder and more obnoxious as he warmed to his theme, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Marcus watched this display with growing disgust. He had been observing David throughout the evening, noting his arrogant demeanor and the dismissive way he treated service staff and colleagues alike. But this level of cruelty toward his own wife revealed something darker about David's character than Marcus had initially suspected. When David's laughter finally died down, Marcus quietly approached the group. "Excuse me," he said in his calm, measured voice. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Marcus Chun." David's entire demeanor shifted instantly. His face went pale as he recognized the name, and he immediately launched into an obsequious display of deference that was almost as disgusting as his earlier cruelty. "Mr. Chun, what an honor. I had no idea you were here. Welcome to Hartwell Industries, sir. We're all so excited about the acquisition." Marcus studied David's face, noting how quickly he could switch from cruelty to charm. "Thank you, David. I wanted to meet all our employees and get a sense of the company culture. You've certainly given me some insight into that tonight." The comment went over David's head entirely. He was too focused on making a good impression to catch the subtle warning in Marcus's tone. "Oh, absolutely, sir. We have an amazing team culture at Hartwell. Everyone really supports each other. We're like a family." Marcus almost smiled at the irony. "I can see how you treat your family, David. It's very illuminating." Again, David missed the deeper meaning, interpreting it as a compliment about the wedding. "Thank you, sir." Sarah really outdid herself with the planning. She has quite a head for logistics and budgeting. "I'm sure she does," Marcus replied, making a mental note about David's casual appropriation of his wife's efforts. "I look forward to learning more about how our employees interact with each other. Company culture is very important to me." After a few more minutes of David's fawning conversation, Marcus excused himself and made his way toward the bathroom area where he had seen Sarah disappear. He found her standing on a small balcony off the hallway, staring out at the garden with tears streaming down her face. She had tried to repair her makeup, but her hands were shaking too badly to manage it effectively. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle her. Sarah turned, quickly wiping her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was out here. I was just getting some air. Please, don't apologize. I'm Marcus Chun. I attended tonight as a courtesy after acquiring your husband's company." I hope you don't mind me saying that you look upset. Sarah forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's nothing, really. Just wetting nerves. It's been a long day. Marcus could see the pain she was trying to hide, and it reminded him so strongly of his own childhood struggles that he felt compelled to offer some form of comfort. Mrs. Mitchell, I don't know you well, but I've been observing tonight, and I can tell you put tremendous effort into creating something beautiful here. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. The genuine kindness in his voice broke through Sarah's defenses, and fresh tears began to fall. Thank you, she whispered. That means more than you know. Marcus handed her his pocket square, a gesture that struck Sarah as incredibly thoughtful. I hope tonight gets better for you, he said simply before returning to the reception. But Marcus had already decided that the evening had revealed everything he needed to know about David Mitchell's character. Over the following weeks, he began a discreet but thorough investigation into his new company's personnel, paying particular attention to David's workplace behavior and professional conduct. What Marcus discovered was even worse than he had expected. Through careful interviews with HR personnel and informal conversations with employees, a pattern emerged of David's problematic behavior spanning several years. Female colleagues reported feeling uncomfortable around him, describing a pattern of inappropriate comments about their appearance and unwelcome attention. Several had filed informal complaints that had been downplayed or ignored by previous management. Marcus also uncovered financial irregularities in David's expense reports. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger automatic alerts, but a consistent pattern of inflated claims and questionable business meals. When Marcus had his forensic accountants dig deeper, they found that David had been systematically padding his expenses for over 2 years, essentially stealing thousands of dollars from the company. Most disturbing was David's workplace reputation for taking credit for others' work. Junior employees and colleagues described projects where David would contribute minimally but position himself to receive recognition when presenting to upper management. His direct reports painted a picture of a man who demanded loyalty while offering none in return. Meanwhile, Marcus's investigation into Sarah revealed an entirely different story. Through legitimate business inquiries with her marketing firm, he learned that she was highly respected by colleagues and clients alike. Her supervisors described her as creative, reliable, and incredibly hardworking. She had single-handedly managed several major campaigns that had exceeded client expectations, and her attention to detail and budget management skills were legendary within the firm. Marcus also discovered the extent of David's financial manipulation in their personal relationship. Through careful legal research, he learned that David had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that protected assets he didn't actually possess, while leaving Sarah vulnerable to all their shared debts. The wedding debt, as Marcus had suspected, was entirely in Sarah's name, despite David's demands for an expensive celebration. Most troubling was what Marcus learned about David's psychological treatment of Sarah throughout their relationship. Through social media analysis and conversations with mutual acquaintances, a picture emerged of systematic emotional abuse. David had gradually isolated Sarah from many of her friends, criticized her appearance constantly under the guise of being helpful, and slowly eroded her self-confidence through a campaign of subtle put-downs and gaslighting. Armed with this information, Marcus began implementing changes at Hartwell Industries that would specifically target David's problematic behaviors. He instituted strict anti-harassment policies with real consequences, brought in external auditors to review all expense accounts, and implemented new project management systems that required clear documentation of individual contributions. Marcus also found legitimate business reasons to interact with Sarah's marketing firm. Hartwell Industries genuinely needed a fresh marketing strategy, and Sarah's company had an excellent reputation in the field. When he requested Sarah specifically for the account, it wasn't nepotism. It was recognition of her proven track record and professional capabilities. Their first business meeting took place 6 weeks after the wedding, in Sarah's company's conference room. Marcus was struck by how different she seemed from the devastated woman he had encountered on the balcony. In her professional environment, Sarah was confident, articulate, and clearly passionate about her work. She presented innovative ideas for repositioning Hartwell Industries in the marketplace, demonstrating a deep understanding of both manufacturing and consumer psychology. "Your proposals are impressive, Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus said after her presentation. You've clearly done extensive research into our industry challenges. Sarah smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Chun. I believe in understanding a client's business from the ground up. Manufacturing has such rich stories to tell, but they're often not communicated effectively to consumers. As they worked together over the following weeks, Marcus witnessed Sarah's professional capabilities firsthand. She was brilliant at identifying market opportunities, creative in her campaign concepts, and meticulous in her execution. More importantly, he observed her gradual return to confidence as she worked on something she genuinely enjoyed. But Marcus also noticed signs that all was not well in Sarah's personal life. She often stayed late at the office, seemed reluctant to go home, and occasionally bore subtle signs of stress that reminded him of his own difficult childhood. When she mentioned in passing that she was trying to be more careful about spending, despite their recent wedding expenses, Marcus began to suspect that David was continuing his financial manipulation. The confrontation Marcus had been planning came sooner than expected. David's increasingly reckless behavior at work, perhaps emboldened by his perception that his connection to a major client made him untouchable, finally provided Marcus with the justification he needed. The incident occurred during a company meeting where David attempted to take credit for a successful project that had been entirely managed by a junior female employee. When she tried to correct the record, David dismissed her contribution publicly and made a comment about pretty girls not understanding real business. The room fell silent as employees recognized the blatant sexism and workplace harassment. Marcus, who had been observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. David, I think we need to discuss this in my office. Immediately. The walk to Marcus's office was silent and tense. David, still oblivious to the seriousness of his situation, seemed to think he was being called in for a promotion discussion. His cocky demeanor only reinforced Marcus's conviction that decisive action was necessary. David, please sit down, Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. On his desk were several manila folders that David eyed curiously. I've been conducting a comprehensive review of company personnel since the acquisition, Marcus began. It's important for me to understand the culture and practices that exist within our organization. David nodded eagerly. Absolutely, Mr. Chun. I think you'll find that our team is really solid. We've got great potential for growth under your leadership. Marcus opened the first folder. Let's start with your expense reports, David. Our forensic accountants have found some interesting patterns. He spread out several documents showing highlighted discrepancies and inflated claims. David's confident expression began to falter. Sir, I can explain any irregularities. Sometimes the expense system doesn't capture all the nuances of business entertainment and client development. Interesting perspective, Marcus replied calmly. How do you explain claiming dinner expenses for evenings when you were actually at company events? Or receipts for business meals with clients who have no record of meeting with you? The color drained from David's face as he realized the thoroughness of the investigation. There might be some administrative errors in the filing system. Marcus opened the second folder. Let's talk about workplace harassment, David. We've documented multiple complaints from female colleagues about inappropriate comments and unwelcome attention. Sir, I think there might be some misunderstandings. I'm very friendly with my colleagues. Sometimes people misinterpret friendliness. Misinterpret comments about their appearance. Misinterpret unwanted invitations to drinks after they've declined. Misinterpret being cornered in empty conference rooms. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. David began to sweat visibly. Mr. Chun, I think some disgruntled employees might be trying to make trouble. Marcus opened the third folder, revealing documentation of David's pattern of claiming credit for others' work. And how do you explain consistently presenting projects as your own work when email trails and project management records show minimal contribution from you? Sir, as a team leader, I coordinate and present our collective efforts. That's standard management practice. No, David. Standard management practice is acknowledging your team's contributions and ensuring they receive appropriate recognition. What you've been doing is theft of intellectual property and professional sabotage. The room fell silent as David realized his carefully constructed professional facade was completely unraveling. Marcus reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small recording device. There's one more thing, David. I believe you should hear this. Marcus pressed play, and David's own voice filled the room. Well, I guess I'm stuck with the fat pig now that we're married. At least she's good with money. David's face went white as he recognized his words from the wedding reception. Mr. Chun, that was just. I'd been drinking, and this is who you are, David, Marcus said quietly. You humiliate your wife in public, you harass your female colleagues, you steal credit for others' work, and you embezzle from your employer. The drinking didn't make you cruel. It just revealed the cruelty that was already there. Marcus stood and walked to his office door. Security will escort you from the building. Your employment is terminated immediately, and we will be pursuing legal action to recover the funds you've stolen. Your access to all company systems has been revoked, and your final paycheck will reflect the money you owe the company. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, as if summoned. David looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape or an ally, but found neither. Mr. Chun, please. I can change. I can be better. I need this job. Marcus looked at him with something that might have been pity. You had every opportunity to be better, David. Instead, you chose to be cruel to people who trusted you. That's not a mistake. It's a character flaw. As security escorted David from the building, Marcus sat alone in his office, feeling the weight of what he had just done. He had effectively destroyed a man's career and livelihood, but he felt no guilt. David's behavior had been escalating, and Marcus knew that without intervention, it would have continued to harm innocent people. What Marcus didn't anticipate was how quickly David's world would completely collapse. Without his income from Hartwell Industries, David could no longer maintain the lifestyle he had been living on credit and Sarah's earnings. The financial house of cards he had built began to tumble almost immediately. Sarah first learned of David's firing when he came home that evening, drunk and furious. For the first time in their relationship, his anger turned physical. He grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises and screamed accusations about her, probably sleeping with the boss, to get him fired. The mask of charm he had maintained throughout their courtship completely fell away, revealing the ugly reality beneath. That night, Sarah packed a bag and went to stay with her sister, finally admitting to someone the extent of David's emotional abuse throughout their relationship. As she talked through years of gaslighting, manipulation, and control, she began to understand how systematically David had worked to undermine her self-worth and independence. The divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of David's financial deception. Sarah discovered that while she had been working overtime to pay for their wedding and taking on debt in her name, David had been maintaining secret accounts and hiding assets. The prenuptial agreement that had been presented as protecting their mutual interests was revealed to be entirely one-sided, leaving Sarah responsible for debts she hadn't known existed. Most devastating was the realization that David had been systematically sabotaging her professionally as well. He had convinced her to turn down several job opportunities that would have advanced her career, claiming they would interfere with their family time. He had also been monitoring her emails and social media, isolating her from colleagues and friends who might have offered support or perspective on his behavior. During this difficult period, Marcus maintained a careful professional relationship with Sarah, ensuring that Hartwell Industries' marketing account provided her with stable income during the divorce proceedings. He was careful not to overstep professional boundaries, recognizing that Sarah needed space to heal and rebuild her sense of self. But Marcus also made sure that opportunities came her way. He recommended her firm to other business contacts, ensuring that her reputation for excellent work spread throughout his professional network. When Sarah mentioned in passing that she was considering going back to school for an MBA, Marcus quietly arranged for information about scholarship programs to reach her through professional development channels. The legal resolution of David's termination and subsequent financial crimes took several months. Marcus's forensic accountants uncovered even more extensive theft than initially suspected, and David ultimately faced criminal charges for embezzlement. The stress of legal proceedings, financial ruin, and professional disgrace took a visible toll on him, but Marcus felt no sympathy. David had chosen his path through a series of deliberate decisions to harm others for his own benefit. Meanwhile, Sarah began the difficult work of rebuilding her life. She started therapy to address the emotional damage from her marriage, gradually recognizing the patterns of abuse that had been normalized in her relationship. She discovered that her constant anxiety about David's moods, her obsessive monitoring of her appearance and behavior, and her isolation from friends and family were all symptoms of systematic psychological manipulation. As Sarah healed, Marcus watched her transformation with admiration. The confident, creative professional he had glimpsed in their business meetings gradually became her consistent personality rather than a facade maintained for work. She began suggesting increasingly ambitious marketing campaigns, taking creative risks that paid off spectacularly for her clients. Their professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship as Sarah became more comfortable with herself and her circumstances. Marcus appreciated her intelligence, creativity, and resilience, while Sarah found in Marcus someone who valued her mind and character above all else. Their conversations ranged from business strategy to art, literature, and philosophy, revealing shared interests and compatible values. The romantic development between them was slow and careful. Marcus was determined not to be a rescuer figure, understanding that Sarah needed to rebuild her own sense of worth and independence. When feelings began to develop between them, they talked openly about the power dynamics involved and the importance of Sarah's continued professional and personal growth. Sarah, for her part, was surprised to find herself attracted to someone so different from David. Where David had been conventionally handsome but ultimately shallow and cruel, Marcus was distinguished and kind, with a depth of character that became more apparent the longer she knew him. His wealth, while initially intimidating, became secondary to their emotional and intellectual connection. Their first official date didn't happen until 8 months after Sarah's divorce was finalized. Marcus had waited until Sarah was fully established in her new life, living independently and thriving professionally. When he finally asked her to dinner at a small, intimate restaurant, it felt like the natural progression of a friendship that had already become deeply meaningful to both of them. "I want you to know," Marcus said over dinner, "that my feelings for you have nothing to do with rescuing you or fixing what David broke. You've done that work yourself. I'm attracted to the woman you are now, not the woman you were when we first met." Sarah smiled, feeling a warmth and security she had never experienced with David. "I appreciate that more than you know. For the first time in years, I feel like someone sees me for who I really am, not who they want me to be." Their relationship developed naturally over the following months. Marcus introduced Sarah to his world of philanthropy and social responsibility, areas where her marketing expertise proved invaluable. Together, they developed programs supporting survivors of domestic abuse and workplace harassment, turning their shared experiences of cruelty into a force for helping others. Sarah discovered that Marcus's wealth, rather than being a source of inequality between them, created opportunities for meaningful work that aligned with both their values. She became involved in his foundation's initiatives, eventually leaving her marketing firm to become director of communications for Marcus's charitable organization. The work was fulfilling in ways that corporate marketing had never been. Sarah found herself creating campaigns that genuinely helped vulnerable people, using her skills to raise awareness about domestic abuse and support survivors in rebuilding their lives. The irony wasn't lost on her that her own experience with David had prepared her to help others facing similar situations. Meanwhile, David's life had taken a very different trajectory. The criminal charges for embezzlement resulted in a conviction and a short jail sentence, though the publicity surrounding the case made it nearly impossible for him to find employment in his field. The financial judgment against him left him essentially bankrupt, and the social consequences of his behavior meant that many of his former friends and colleagues distanced themselves from him. David's response to his downfall was predictable. He blamed everyone but himself. He claimed Marcus had framed him out of jealousy over Sarah, that Sarah had somehow orchestrated his firing to justify divorce, and that the justice system was biased against him. His inability to accept responsibility for his actions or show genuine remorse meant that his relationships continued to deteriorate. 2 years after his termination from Hartwell Industries, David was working in a series of low-paying jobs and living in a studio apartment, a far cry from the lifestyle he had maintained during his marriage to Sarah. Occasionally, he would attempt to contact Sarah, either through social media or mutual acquaintances, but she had learned to maintain firm boundaries and refused all contact. Sarah's healing process had taught her that David's cruelty stemmed from his own insecurities and character flaws, not from anything she had done wrong. This understanding freed her from the guilt and self-blame that had characterized the later years of their marriage. She realized that David's treatment of her said everything about him and nothing about her worth as a person. The contrast between David's downward spiral and Sarah's flourishing life served as a powerful reminder that character ultimately determines destiny. While David continued to blame external circumstances for his problems, Sarah had taken responsibility for her healing and growth, resulting in a life far richer and more meaningful than anything she had experienced during her marriage. Marcus's patient, respectful approach to their relationship had allowed Sarah to rediscover her own worth and strength. Unlike David, who had tried to diminish her to make himself feel larger, Marcus consistently encouraged Sarah's growth and independence. Their partnership was built on equality and mutual respect rather than control and dependency. When Marcus finally proposed, it was during a quiet moment in Sarah's apartment as they worked together on a presentation for their foundation. He had been watching her passion and intelligence as she outlined strategies for helping abuse survivors, and he realized that he wanted to spend his life supporting and being supported by this remarkable woman. "Sarah," he said, interrupting her explanation of a new outreach program, "will you marry me?" She looked up from her laptop, startled by the sudden shift in conversation. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. I love your mind, your heart, your strength, and your kindness. I want to build a life with you based on everything we've discovered we share." Sarah's engagement to Marcus was everything her first engagement had not been. Instead of being about status or appearance, it was about partnership and shared values. Instead of requiring her to diminish herself, it encouraged her continued growth. Instead of being based on control and manipulation, it was founded on mutual respect and genuine affection. Their wedding was a simple, elegant ceremony focused on their commitment rather than external display. The guest list included close friends and family who had supported them both through difficult times, and the atmosphere was one of joy and authenticity rather than performance and obligation. The contrast with Sarah's first wedding was stark. Where her marriage to David had been expensive and showy, but emotionally hollow, her marriage to Marcus was modest in scale, but rich in meaning. Where David had spent their reception humiliating her to his colleagues, Marcus spent their reception expressing genuine gratitude to the people who had helped them both become who they were. Marcus's wedding toast captured the essence of their relationship. "Sarah has taught me that real strength isn't about having power over others, but about lifting each other up. She's shown me that love isn't about possessing someone, but about supporting their journey to become their best self. I'm grateful every day that she chose to share that journey with me." In the months following their wedding, Sarah continued to thrive in her work with the foundation while also pursuing the MBA she had delayed during her first marriage. Marcus supported her academic goals practically and emotionally, understanding that her education was important to her sense of professional accomplishment. Their shared work in philanthropy gave their relationship a sense of purpose beyond their personal happiness. They found deep satisfaction in using their combined resources and skills to make a meaningful difference in other people's lives. Sarah's experience with abuse, rather than being something to hide or overcome, became a source of insight and empathy that informed their charitable work. The Foundation's programs grew significantly under Sarah's leadership, helping hundreds of survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives and careers. Sarah often spoke at conferences and workshops, sharing her story as a way of encouraging others and breaking down the shame and stigma surrounding abuse. During one particularly meaningful presentation, Sarah reflected on her journey. "I spent years believing that my worth was determined by how well I could meet someone else's expectations, how carefully I could avoid triggering someone else's anger. Recovery meant learning that my worth is inherent and not dependent on anyone else's approval or treatment of me." Marcus, watching from the audience, felt profound pride in the woman Sarah had become. Not because he had saved her, she had saved herself, but because she had chosen to share her journey with him and allow him to support her growth. Their relationship had taught them both that authentic love creates security rather than requiring performance. Unlike Sarah's first marriage, where she had constantly tried to be who David wanted her to be, her marriage to Marcus allowed her to be fully herself while still growing and changing. The legal and professional consequences for David continued to unfold years after his initial firing. His pattern of workplace harassment had been so extensive that several former colleagues filed civil suits against both him and previous employers who had failed to address his behavior. The financial judgments, combined with his criminal conviction, left him with limited options for rebuilding his career or reputation. More importantly, David's inability to accept responsibility for his actions meant that he never developed the self-awareness necessary for genuine change. He continued to blame others for his circumstances, ensuring that he would repeat the same patterns of behavior in future relationships and employment. Sarah occasionally heard updates about David's situation through mutual acquaintances, but she felt no satisfaction in his continued struggles. Her healing had taught her that revenge was less important than building a meaningful life, and she had no desire to waste emotional energy on someone who had already taken enough from her. Instead, Sarah focused on the present and future she was creating with Marcus. Their relationship had shown her what healthy love looked like, supportive rather than controlling, encouraging rather than diminishing, based on respect rather than fear. As they celebrated their second wedding anniversary, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that humiliating moment at her first wedding reception. The woman who had once believed she deserved David's cruelty had become someone who wouldn't tolerate even mild disrespect from anyone. "Do you ever think about that night at the reception?" Sarah asked Marcus as they walked through the garden of their home. "I think about how brave you were," Marcus replied. "Standing there, taking that humiliation, and still finding the strength to walk away and rebuild your life. That took incredible courage." Sarah smiled, appreciating how Marcus consistently reframed her experiences in terms of her strength rather than her victimization. "I think about how different my life would be if you hadn't been there that night. Not because you rescued me, but because you saw something in me that I had forgotten existed. I saw who you really were underneath all the damage David had done," Marcus said. "But you're the one who did the work to rediscover that person and become even stronger than before." Their conversation reflected the healthy dynamic that characterized their relationship, acknowledging the impact of past trauma while focusing on growth and healing rather than dwelling on pain and victimization. Sarah's work with the foundation had taught her that recovery from abuse is an ongoing process rather than a destination. Even years later, she occasionally struggled with self-doubt or old patterns of thinking that David had instilled. But she had learned to recognize these moments and had developed healthy coping strategies with the support of continued therapy and Marcus's unwavering encouragement. The foundation's success had also created opportunities for Sarah to influence policy and social attitudes about domestic abuse and workplace harassment. She testified before legislative committees about the need for stronger protections for victims and better training for employers and law enforcement. Her public speaking and advocacy work had made Sarah something of a recognized figure in the field of domestic abuse prevention, but she wore this recognition lightly. Her motivation remained personal, the desire to help others avoid or escape the kind of treatment she had endured with David. Marcus supported Sarah's advocacy work completely, understanding that her public role in addressing these issues was both personally healing and socially important. He used his business connections and resources to amplify her message and support the foundation's policy initiatives. Together, they had created a life that was meaningful far beyond their personal happiness. Their shared commitment to helping others had strengthened their relationship while giving them a sense of purpose that extended beyond themselves. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus and Sarah hosted a celebration that doubled as a fundraiser for the foundation. The event brought together abuse survivors, policymakers, business leaders, and advocates in a gathering that reflected the community they had built around their shared values. During her remarks that evening, Sarah looked out at the assembled guests, many of whom were women she had helped through the foundation's programs, and reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 5 years ago, I believed that love meant accepting cruelty, that partnership meant diminishing yourself to make someone else comfortable, that my worth was determined by someone else's treatment of me. Recovery meant learning that real love amplifies rather than diminishes, that healthy partnership means supporting each other's growth, and that my worth is inherent and unshakable. She paused to look at Marcus, who was watching her with the same admiration and respect he had shown from the beginning of their relationship. But most importantly, I learned that we have a choice about how we respond to cruelty when we encounter it. We can allow it to diminish us, or we can use our experience to help others and create something meaningful from our pain. The applause that followed was heartfelt and sustained, reflecting not just appreciation for Sarah's words, but recognition of the work she and Marcus had done to transform personal trauma into social good. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Sarah and Marcus stood together in their garden, reflecting on how far they had traveled from that painful night at her first wedding reception. "Do you think David ever learned anything from what happened?" Sarah asked, not out of concern for her ex-husband, but from curiosity about human nature and the possibility of redemption. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think some people are capable of growth and change when they face consequences for their actions. But that requires humility and self-reflection, qualities David never demonstrated even when his world was falling apart." "I used to think I needed him to apologize or acknowledge what he did to me," Sarah admitted. "But I realized that my healing didn't depend on his recognition of the harm he caused. It depended on my own work to rebuild my sense of self." "That's what makes you remarkable," Marcus said, taking her hand. "You took responsibility for your own healing rather than waiting for someone else to validate your experience." Their conversation captured the wisdom Sarah had gained through her recovery process. The understanding that healing from abuse requires taking agency over one's own life rather than waiting for external validation or apology. As they walked toward their house, Sarah felt grateful not just for the love she had found with Marcus, but for the strength she had discovered within herself. The woman who had once believed she deserved David's cruelty had become someone who wouldn't tolerate disrespect from anyone, who used her voice to help others, and who had built a life of meaning and purpose. The story of Sarah's transformation from victim to survivor to advocate illustrated the power of authentic love to heal trauma and create positive change. Her relationship with Marcus had provided the security and support necessary for her growth, while her own courage and determination had made that growth possible. In the end, David's moment of cruelty at their wedding reception had set in motion a chain of events that led to justice for his behavior and healing for his victim. His attempt to humiliate Sarah had ultimately revealed his own character while showcasing her resilience and worth. The contrast between David's continued decline and Sarah's flourishing life served as a powerful reminder that our choices shape our destiny. David's choice to respond to his own insecurities through cruelty and control had ultimately destroyed everything he claimed to value, while Sarah's choice to heal and grow had created a life richer than anything she had previously imagined. Their story demonstrated that while we cannot control the cruelty others might inflict upon us, we can control how we respond to that cruelty. Sarah's response, to heal, to grow, to help others, and to build a life based on authentic love rather than control, had transformed a moment of deep humiliation into the foundation for a meaningful and purposeful existence. As they settled into their home for the evening, Sarah and Marcus knew that their story was far from over. Their work with the foundation continued to expand, their relationship continued to deepen, and their commitment to helping others remained as strong as ever. But they also knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with the strength that comes from authentic love and shared purpose. The cruel words David had spoken at their wedding reception 7 years earlier had long since lost their power to hurt Sarah. In their place was a deep understanding of her own worth, a commitment to using her voice to help others, and the security that comes from being truly known and loved for who she really is.